right, so today on the AM show, we're focusing on the 2022 budget presentation. Joy Business has been picking up some indicators. Amongst them, the likelihood that road tolls could be going up by more than 100%, or road tolls could be factored into the price of fuel, which will then mean that the price of fuel could go up further. There's also the issue of property taxes. It is a fact that very few people pay property taxes, which by themselves are also very low. But that sits with the Metropolitan, Municipal and District Assemblies, which have not done a good job in collecting these taxes. So should government take over and share the revenue with the assemblies? That's something that government is mulling over. So we'll be talking about all of those conversations. George Jaffe will be joining me, and we'll have a conversation on that. We'll also be at the Bosokai Spare Parts Hub to speak with the traders there about speculations that the benchmark values for imports could be reviewed. The GRA is saying no such move until you hear it communicated in the budget. So we'll be hearing about that. But Enimwa will be out there to engage the traders about their expectations. But then in education, there's research by education think tank, Africa Education Watch, which shows more than 400,000 children, approximately 1 in 4 pre-primary age children, are still enrolled in kindergarten, with over 147,000 dropping out between kindergarten and junior high school. So I'll be taking you through their research in a bit, and then they'll join us, and then we can have a conversation about that, as well as the expectations about the budget as far as education is concerned. So under Article 38(2) of the 1992 Constitution of the Republic of Ghana, the government has an obligation to provide free, quality, basic education for all Ghanaian children, irrespective of gender, geography, religion, socioeconomic status, or one's disability. But this research by Africa Education Watch shows that more than 400,000 children, approximately 1 in 4 pre-primary age children, are still not enrolled in kindergarten, with over 447,000 dropping out between kindergarten and junior high school. Now, in the last 10 years, they're saying the number of public schools increased from 36,822 in 2010 to 41,598 in 2018, an increase of about 13%. And private schools have increased from 18,380 to 36,327. That's more like double. And then the lack of public JHS in about 25% of primary schools is a major driver of the demand for private education, affecting the ability of public primary graduates to transition to JHS. Now, there are 15,291 primary and 11,094 JHS. This means that some 4,194 primary schools do not have access to a JHS, right? The situation is worse in rural districts like Sene East in the Bruno East region, where there are only 17 JHS, 17, 10 plus 7. 749 primary schools, meaning 65% of primary schools do not have access to a JHS. We'll be getting into these details shortly, as I get joined by Africa Education Watch's Kofi Asare, plus another colleague of his. So we can get on with the conversation now. Kofi Asare is Executive Director, Africa Education Watch, and Richard Kwashi Kover is a convener, CAPCO, is a campaign against privatization and commercialization of education. All right, good morning to you, and thank you for joining us for this conversation, Kofi. So let's start with you with this research that you've picked up, you've done as far as education is concerned. Some interesting finding, but the crux of it is that there are a number of people who finish primary and there wouldn't be places for them in JHS essentially.
Exactly. Good morning. Good morning to your cherished audience. We are embarking on a campaign which is called Education Spike, with the objective of engaging governments to spike up the quality of public basic education.
Yeah.
And this campaign is being led by the Coalition for the against the privatization and commercialization of education, which is CAPCO.
Okay.
We are partnering CAPCO and then Oxfam to drum home the need for government of Ghana to improve funding and the resourcing of public basic education as a means of improving its quality. So this research, which was a policy research, was actually part of activities to gather evidence of exclusion, evidence of neglect for basic education over the past decade.
Right.
And it is through the findings of the research that we identified that between 2008 and 2018, for instance, the share of the education sector expenditure that went to basic education reduced from 55 to 37%. That's about 18 percentage points decline, which means that as we inch towards the Sustainable Development Goals 4 by 2030, we keep reducing the percentage of basic education share of the education sector expenditure. And as you keep reducing funding available to basic education percentage-wise, it virtually means that you are limiting the ability of the Ministry of Education and GAS to build more schools. And that is why we now have 4,000 primary schools without a junior high school, where students graduate into out of school, or you have to find money and then access private junior high school education, which is expensive, unaffordable to the poorest of the poor.
So there's research that you've done is between 2010 and 2018. But so we don't know what has happened between 2019 and 2020.
Nothing significant has happened. At the end of 2019-2020 academic year, basic education received 39% of the education sector expenditure, 39%. And so nothing significant has happened.
Okay, but could we
and at the end of the 2019-2020 academic year, in that particular year, only 100 primary schools were constructed in the entire country. 261 or so districts, only 100 primary schools were constructed nationwide. It tells you that even the ratio is less than 0.5 to a district. It means that we are not expanding public basic education. In Adenta municipality, for instance, the whole of Adenta, there are only 16 primary schools that are public schools. Only 7% of the total number of basic schools in Adenta municipality are public. All of them are private, only 7%. So it means that if you are a poor person living in such peri-urban, such middle class, lower middle class urban settlement like Adenta, you are compelled to enroll your child in a private school or they drop out. That is why 400,000 children are still not in school.
Could it also be that the share of the percentage of people who are poor in these areas are not that significant?
It is actually...
Could it be a reflection of the percentage of people who are poor?
No, I think it is even more significant in municipalities like Adenta, where I have lived before. Adenta is not a middle class municipality, it's a lower middle class municipality.
But you'd appreciate that the number of people are migrating from the lower class towards the lower middle class?
Even for the lower class and the lower middle class, free compulsory universal basic education is a constitutional obligation on the government. And it does not exempt the middle class from enjoying free compulsory universal basic education because the taxes of the middle class and the lower middle class and the poorest of the poor are the same revenue streams used to mobilize and fund free compulsory universal basic education. So why would you deny a poor person or a middle class person access to public basic education after taking their taxes to provide same for them? That is an issue. And that is why CAPCO is against the commercialization of education, because once you don't provide it, you commercialize it by restricting our access to private education.
All right, CAPCO, why is it a problem if we're having commercialization of education? Because, of course, government can't do it all. So government, yes, in the past, was heavily involved in education. But if the private sector realizes that, there's a growing middle class, which we have to cater to, and so we're building schools and attracting them, what's so bad about that?
So before I come to your question, CAPCO basically is made up of teacher unions and civil society organizations. So I'm representing the teacher unions under this and then convener. Yeah, so when you look at the statistics that you presented earlier, you notice that the private schools have grown by 98% over the 10-year period that we look at. Now, when you look at that, now per the Constitution, it didn't say that Kofi Menu's child should not have access to education, whilst Kojo's child should have access to education. Now, if we are looking at private education as a way of helping government to fund education, then the question then comes, how many people can afford? And then we shouldn't be looking at it like, oh, maybe it's just a child or there are not many. Even if it's one child, the Constitution guarantees that that child should receive quality basic education. Because that is where it all starts. It is at the basic level that character formation of the child begins. So if you don't get it right at that stage, then they grow up to become a nuisance later in future. So we are not against private people setting up schools in the community, but what we are advocating for is the fact that people should have the choice as to where they want their children to educate. They want to educate their children. So when we have a situation where I live in an area where the only option I have is a private school, so if I do not have the means, then we'll have the over 400,000 children who are not yet enrolled in school. They will also have, maybe at the beginning I could afford, but then along the line, my work is no longer earning me that much, so my child is likely to drop out of school. So we have a situation where we have about 147,000 children dropping out of school, and that is a concern.
At which level?
Between KG and then junior high school. So that is a great concern.
That's 36 every day. 36 every day.
So it's a great concern that we should all be very, very much concerned about, because...
And are they dropping out because they don't have access, or they're dropping out for a number of reasons?
Yeah, so this is a situation at the kindergarten level. Maybe that is the only option they have. And then currently we are experiencing what we call low-cost profit schools. And then most of these schools operate on what we call pay-as-you-go. Pay-as-you-go means that because they realize that the people in those areas do not have enough resources, they cannot afford to pay school fees. Very good. So they will tell you, you pay 3 cedis, 50% or 5 cedis a day. So it means that the day the parent does not have money, that child has to stay at home.
All right.
So the day the child is not in school, that means the contact hours, what the child is supposed to learn that day, is gone. When he comes back the next 3 days, when the parents could afford money, it means that we're not going to teach what he has lost. So if we are educating our children, our citizens, in a pay-as-you-go manner, what it means is that we are losing it as a country.
Okay. I want us to avoid a situation where we may be exaggerating the situation. So is it the case that people have attempted, or they want to enroll in a particular school, in a public school, and the school says, we can't accept you? Is that what is happening? Are we getting that?
Yeah, so that is also there. So we are talking about infrastructure. So if you look at our study, it also talks about infrastructure for basic, public basic education. Now, so the current situation around the urban areas and then the peri-urban areas, where probably you find one public school at the corner and then you have to walk like 6-10 kilometers. That could accommodate only 60 people. And currently, most of them are hosting close to 100 pupils per class. And so adding more means that some of them must learn on the corridors or under trees. And so when the school is overburdened with the enrollment, they will have to reject some people. So when you post-COVID school reopening...
Do they actually reject people?
They are not rejecting, but you don't have a place to put the child.
So they maybe sit you out.
So they will tell you, check from the next school, because the classrooms are choked. Where you stand before you teach, it's not there. And most of the schools are running shifts. Even under the shift system, the enrollment is still high. So when you have that situation, and one thing about education is that actually at the lower level, is that we don't have to put so much children in one class. Because when you do that, you are babysitting, you're not really teaching. Because every child has a unique learning ability needs. Okay. And so the teacher must have that individual attention for each of them. So when the class begins to grow to the extent that you cannot give the children that individual attention, then the quality of the education you are delivering is affected in one way or the other.
So in the last few years, we've seen that government is focusing or spending quite a bit on free SHS. So you'd appreciate that certainly you're going to see a lot more money when you look at it in percentage terms. The amount of money that will be coming to the basic level, education at the basic level, will be dwindling. But it may not necessarily mean that we're spending less at the basic education level. I would want us to come to that in a bit, but still, we're still focusing on the budget, and we'll be coming as well to look at what your expectations are as far as the budget is concerned and what you'd want to see done differently when it comes to the amount of money or funding that's going to the basic education. But I also have George Wiafe. He has been monitoring the conversations between the people involved in the putting together the budget, and he's been monitoring the meetings, the back and forth meetings and all of that. So he's joining us, and he's going to be telling us what he's picking up, the indicators that they've been picking up in the last year. One of the interesting things that I'm hearing is the possibility that we're going to get property taxes going up, we're going to get road tolls going up, and whether it's going to be factored into the price of fuel and all of that. These are conversations that George Wiafe will be bringing to us. But we'll take a quick break, just a quick break, and then we'll come back. All right, so let's continue. We're having some issues with the connection to George, so we'll resolve that, and then we'll have that conversation with him. So I was asking, looking at how much money is being spent on free SHS, could it be that it does not necessarily mean that we're spending any less when it comes to basic education?
Yeah, so when you look at it in totality, looking at the numbers, you assume that you are spending so much, but on the ground, it's little. Why am I saying that? It is said that when you draw a budget and cannot take care of your need, meaning you've not even put proper plan in place when you're drawing your budget. So if we consider education as a critical sector of the economy, which is supposed to be produce human capital, then there's a need for us to put more money into education. And then it may not come within the shortest possible time, but in future you get the money back. So whatever money that is invested in education can be recouped within a 10 years period. But when the people get quality education and can go out there and then turn raw materials into finished products, instead of always asking for investors to come and do that, and then the money goes back and we go and borrow it, if we can restructure our educational system to take care of that, what it means is that most of the borrowing that we do, we will not do it because we have built our human resource in a manner to take care of our needs. And that is what China, Singapore, Malaysia, and the rest have done. So if we want to get there, go Ghana beyond age, then what it means is that we have to invest more in education. Okay. And it should start from the basic level. So I always say that we currently in the country, due to the poor investment in basic education, we do not have the resources to train the children in a manner that they can identify where their talent is. And so some people even finish university and they're still looking for what they can do.
Okay. I tend to appreciate where you're coming from when you say that. Essentially, you're saying we are focusing, or we could do a whole lot more to overhaul the education system at the basic level,
yes,
so that it becomes more relevant.
Yes, very, very relevant. That is why it should start from, not the child getting to university before.
So I would ask you, Kofi Asare, this is the same question I put to him. Is it the case that we're spending less on basic education? Because what I've heard so far has to do with the percentage involved. I mean, when it comes to basic education, the percentage involved is declining. But does it mean that the amount of money actually being spent is declining?
Yeah, before I come to that, let me reiterate the fact that there are Ghanaian children who have been denied admission into public schools because the schools are full.
That's the case?
It is never an exaggeration. It is never an exaggeration. We have
so
done...
the attempt to want to enroll in a public school and they're told that we can't take you.
It is too common, it shouldn't even be news. You understand? But if you have 25% of your primary schools not having junior high schools, where will the 25% graduate into? If you go to AME Zion School in Ninyano, you won't get admission. Umaria, you won't get admission. If you go to EB Primary, or EB Primary right now, Primary, there are already 80 in a class, 70 in a class. There's no admission there. And the school is already running a shift system. The 70 is actually one shift. So the fact that many public schools are full, the reason why the poorest of the poor or citizens whose taxes are supposed to be used to, are being used to finance free basic education, cannot enjoy what their taxes are being used to finance, is no news. Admissions are not available in these schools, especially in the urban and peri-urban areas. So parents are compelled to enroll their children in private schools. That is why the financing question is very important. As we keep declining the budgetary allocation and the expenditure allocation to basic education, the reason that all you are doing is that you are actually reducing the number of schools you can build in a year. It is as simple as that. There were times we were building 500 schools in a year. If in a year we build 100 primary schools, it means that there's limited money available. Now look at the budget. In 2019, the CAPEX budget, the capital expenditure budget of the Ministry of Education, from which schools are built, was only a little above 1 billion. That's 1 billion. And that was 6.7% of the entire education sector envelope. The cash goes into payment of salaries and then goods and services. So CAPEX only 6.7. Out of the 6.7, majority of the money went into free secondary education infrastructure.
All right.
Basic had very little. Now, GET Fund...
The amount that went to basic, is it less than what
it was
giving the previous year?
It was nothing to write home about. It was less than 15%. Very, very small. Very, very small. So the significant amount went into secondary and tertiary. Secondary had about half of that amount. Come to GET Fund. GET Fund is the biggest source of infrastructure development or financing in the sector, especially for basic schools. But GET Fund has suffered a setback in the past 4 years. Since 2017, when the finance minister went to Parliament and got Parliament to pass the Capping Act, the law capped GET Fund at 25%, in addition to other statutory funds. The effect of the capping on GET Fund's allocation is that, irrespective of the inflow, as you pay VAT, you pay GET Fund, irrespective of the inflow, GET Fund allocation is capped at 25%. So the meaning is this year, only 1.4 billion was allocated to GET Fund, out of about close to 5 billion that we project would have accrued to GET Fund. You understand? So the finance minister will take about 3.5 from the GET Fund receivables and allocate only 1.4. The remaining 3.5 also will go to other sectors for other purposes. Okay. Now this 1.4 billion that came to GET Fund, 60% this year, 60% went into debt financing in the education sector, debt servicing. So only 40% of the 1.4 billion was available for allocation. So how many schools can it build? You understand? So the capping of GET Fund is hurting basic education infrastructure. I'm not saying secondary education infrastructure, because for secondary education, we have used part of GET Fund as security to go for a $1.5 billion, not cedis, $1.5 billion loan, which is now being converted into a fixed-term bond at 20.5 coupon rate. So there's cash to finance secondary education infrastructure expansion, because that loan is mainly, it's not entirely, but mainly geared towards expanding secondary education infrastructure and then ending the double track system. But basic education hasn't got that special attention.
Yeah.
So the capping of GET Fund is killing initiatives to build schools. If you don't build schools, how can you provide 4,000 primary schools with junior high schools? We have predicted and advised government that in the next 5 years, so in the next 4 years, we have to construct a net of 1,000 schools, junior high schools, in a year, to bridge the gap and ensure parity between the number of private schools, the number of primary schools and junior high schools, so that every child that has access to a primary school will not have to struggle to go and access junior high school or drop out. Now, how can you ensure that you are building a net? I'm not saying 1,000 junior high schools, a net. It means that if you build 100 junior high schools this year, you have to build 200 senior high schools.
Yeah.
Don't build primary schools without junior high schools again.
Okay.
And ensure that you are building at least 100 plus, a net of 100 junior high schools every year. How can you do this if GET Fund has been capped? And GET Fund is losing about 2/3 of revenue to other sectors. And the basic education is being underfunded from the CAPEX angle. It is not possible. That is why we are saying that the finance minister must take a second look at the capping of GET Fund, because it is hurting the ability of the Ministry of Education to provide schools at the basic level, especially in urban, in peri-urban areas, and then some rural schools where we have schools taking place under trees. Right. And we have 5,400 schools that are taking place this morning under trees and then under sheds.
The finance minister, before any budget presentation, would engage in consultations.
Yeah.
Has Africa Education Work taken part in any such consultations?
Yeah, we have. We are part of Africa Education Work Education Spike. There's a civil society budget called platform where CSOs came together to discuss issues and then submit a common position on the budget.
Did you make these recommendations?
Yes, we started engaging the finance ministry about a month ago.
All right.
From here, I'm attending a meeting at the finance ministry from here. So you've been having discussions with the finance ministry on the need to uncap the GET Fund, you see. If we want to say basic education is a priority, we must move beyond the grammar and let it reflect our wallets. If we make basic education a priority and we decide to resource it well, there wouldn't be any reason why in an entire municipality like Adenta, you have only 16 primary schools and then over 15 government primary schools and over 200 private primary schools. So we must start from somewhere. And we want to start from the point where citizens must not accept the fact that
the private schools are taking over.
No, they must not accept the fact that it is cool not to have access to a good public school. It is not cool, because your taxes are supposed to be used to provide your children with a good public school. So the fact that you are in Accra does not mean that you are confined to a private school. Yeah. No, government's obligation doesn't end with your community being urban, and for that matter, government cannot, shelve, or if you like, government cannot sit back and watch the private sector actually fulfill a responsibility of government.
That should be that of government. So we'll be coming to this conversation, the question that I asked about your expectations of the budget. But I have George Jaffe now on. Hello, George.
Hi, Easy. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. Okay, so we've been looking at, we've been hearing what government is seeking to do, especially with road tolls and property taxes and all of that, plus the benchmark values. I'd want us to start with the road toll, that government is contemplating scrapping road tolls entirely and then rather incorporating it into the prices of fuel.
Yeah, Israel, you're right on that one. So there are two options on the table as we speak right now. One is that either they increase the current tolls as it stands right now, or put it on price of petroleum products. So you have a situation where the road toll component on price of petroleum products are expected to go up. And so things are still being finalized as we speak, Israel, right now. And why government is doing that, they want to find a very innovative way to finance the poor road infrastructure that we have in the country. That is why that is being considered on the road toll angle, Israel.
All right, but I'm sure government also appreciates that if they factor it into the price of fuel, then you're going to essentially that's going to impact the prices of virtually every commodity in the country.
You're right on that one. And the argument has always been made that what is the safest way, or quote, laziest way in raising revenue is just to lump it on petroleum products because you and I, everyone cannot escape from it. And that is why that option is also being looked at, Israel. I mean, what we are sure of and what we can firm up is that they are looking at a more innovative way to widen the tax net. Would that result in rates going up, or more of an efficient avenue in the collection of taxes is still being considered? As we speak right now, meetings are being finalized on the budget with respect to the way forward to improve revenue. So anything can happen in Israel as we speak right now before the minister goes to Parliament to present the budget.
The other thing that you mentioned has to do with property taxes. What exactly is government seeking to do with that? Because it has typically been something that the MMDAs have been handling. But you're saying that government is looking at taking it over.
So, Israel, there's a current ongoing debate about how can the revenue be expanded. And one area that has been seriously under-mobilized when it comes to revenue has to do with property tax. Now, what we are picking up is that can we still allow these local authorities to collect these taxes and then government finds a way to share with them, or the government takes over the collection of these taxes and then more of a 50-50 or share it with these local authorities? Look at an area like East Legon. It is believed that still most properties there are not being taxed. So that is also being connected, because the challenge right now in Israel is that either we mobilize more revenue locally or we go out and borrow. The other option being considered, which is seen as the best, is raising revenue more locally, Israel.
All right, and then the other thing has to do with the benchmark values on imports. There's been some back and forth on that. What exactly is government looking at?
Well, Israel, what we can say for sure is that it is going to be reviewed. What is being in contention right now is that which items should it affect. But what we can assure you right now is that that policy is going to be reversed.
It's going to be reversed or reviewed?
Yes, reversed. So now it's going to go back, and the 50% will now be applied on items that are being imported. But right now, which are those key items that it should affect? That is what is being fine-tuned right now as we speak, Israel.
What other indicators are you picking as far as government mobilization of revenue is concerned? You've talked about a number of things. You've talked about the road tolls consideration vis-a-vis slapping those taxes on the price of petroleum products. And then you've also talked about the property taxes. Is there anything else that government is looking at, something quite radical?
Well, they will be hard on revenue. And as I'm saying that, there's still this argument about whether you improve efficiency or you still look at hiking rates. But they'll be very, very heavy on revenue as we speak right now. Talk about the fiscal consolidation and also being heavy on supporting private sector to create jobs. So for those broad themes, we can assure that irrespective of whatever happens in today's meeting, that could be the broad focus of the budget when they present to Parliament.
All right, thank you very much, George Wiafe. George Wiafe is with Joy Business, and he has been giving us some insights and indicators that Joy Business has been picking as far as the budget is concerned. The budget is going to be presented tomorrow, and it's going to be live here on Joy News and on Joy FM and all of our platforms. But back into the studio with Kofi Asare. So we're expecting that the budget is going to be presented tomorrow. What are the kind of things that you would want to see or hear from the finance minister to assure you that they intend to take basic education, the funding of basic education, a lot more seriously?
Yeah, so tomorrow, what we are expecting, CAPCO is expecting, is to hear the finance minister telling Ghanaians that we are decapping this on the gate fund to make that difference available for infrastructure development at the basic level. That is the most thing that we are expecting to hear tomorrow. And we'll be very disappointed if the issues of education infrastructure at the basic level is not taken seriously in the budget. Because as the years goes by, the numbers are increasing. And if you look at the deliveries that we receive on daily basis at the various hospitals, what it means is that we are not planning ahead of time. And that data should guide us in planning for education and other resources. But it looks as if there's that disconnect between what is happening. Because if a child is born today, in 4 years' time, he will start school. So it means that there should be provision for that child, starting from today that he's born. So if you are not doing that as a nation, and we are focusing on other areas that are more or less exhaustible expenditure, what it means is that we'll keep going round, what we call at the KG level, merry-go-round. And it's not helping us. So we want to see an investment in education infrastructure being captured in the budget. Then also, apart from the physical infrastructure, we want to also see a lot of resources being put there, because education delivery goes with resources. So if you look at the current state of our schools, the only good resource there is a professional teacher. If you take the professional teacher out.
In some schools.
In some schools, yeah. If you take the teacher out, it means that it is nothing to write home about. So we want to see a lot more investment. We are talking about digitization. It means that in our classroom, there should be technology-mediated approach to our teaching. So I know they've started with one laptop per teacher. But it also means that the children also need that. So we want to see more of these things schools being furnished with these facilities, so that we can begin to develop the children to think critically, through develop their research ideas right from the scratch. So that is what other countries do. So that's one of the things. So then, as a teacher, the leader of a teacher union, I want to say on the authority that we are not going to accept the 7% that was budgeted for 2022. So we want to see a budget that reflects that, because we were going to call for a renegotiation for the 20, because we can't survive.
Yeah.
So if a teacher goes to a class very hungry, definitely the children are going to suffer. And these are some of our expectations from tomorrow's budget.
All right, and you could.
Yeah, I think, he's mentioned the need for the CAPEX expenditure, the CAPEX allocation to the Education Ministry to move to significant levels, at least up to 20%. But, there's one thing about this budget that should compel the GAS and the Ministry of Education to put its acts together when it comes to teacher rationalization. I'm expecting the CAPEX expenditure or allocation to increase from 6.7 to about 20%. It means that another subsector's expenditure will have to reduce. And it may be salaries. And I am happy to see salaries not increasing significantly, but rather remaining stagnant, and the increment affecting CAPEX. Why am I saying so? We need money to build more schools, and CAPEX must increase. But if you look at the teacher issue, I'm talking about teacher rationalization, we keep saying that we have more teachers that are surplus to manpower in the system. So the emphasis should not be on recruiting new teachers just to post them to areas where they are not needed. We are doing a teacher rationalization study. In Adenta and Kumasi Metro alone, there are 500 teachers that are surplus to manpower in primary schools, just primary schools.
And if you say they are surplus, so they're simply idling?
They are idling. Adenta has 16 primary schools. They have more than 200 teachers. What are they doing there? Adenta. I won't go any further. Adenta. So 16 primary schools. 16. Adenta alone has over 200 teachers that they are not required. They are surplus to manpower. In between 2019 and 2020, when Adenta was already overpopulated with teachers, we actually increased the number of teachers by about 137 more, just in the election year.
And these are public school teachers?
Public primary schools. And this is data for the Education Ministry, not our data. So we have always said that if you look at the projection on the Education Strategy Plan, the number of teachers we need to deliver in primary and junior high schools is about 285,000 or so. We have passed that number. So why are there empty classrooms in many schools. It means that some teachers are available in areas where they are not needed, but they want to be there because they want to be in town. So at Denta, we've done only 2 municipalities, 1 metro, 1 municipality, Kumasi Metro and Adenta. These 2, there are over 500 teachers that are surplus to labor requirements. So if the finance minister fails to give clearance to recruit more teachers, and I know the teachers waiting for posting will not be happy with me.
Yes.
But I'm asking for money to build schools. You see, it's a chicken and egg. So
if the schools are built, then they could be hired.
There's an opportunity cost. You can't ask finance minister to build 200 or 300 or 400 junior high schools this year and expect same to give clearance to recruit 40,000 teachers. Where will the money come from? So address teacher salary issues, yes, I agree. But what we are saying is that if you are increasing the budget, increase it towards CAPEX so that we can eliminate the 5,403 schools and the trees much faster. But we have to build 700 every year for the next 5 years. We need 3.5 billion. There's no money. So put in money there and put in money towards building junior high schools in the 4,000 primary schools without junior high schools. So that the child in Nkwanta South can complete primary school and continue. However, because you have excess teachers in some of the districts, make sure you redistribute them, rationalize their distribution, and take them to Nkwanta South where they are needed. After that, we can talk about hiring new teachers. Other than that, you will be throwing money away, and money that is not even available. So as we are talking about an allocation of funding, we are not losing sight of the fact that we must be efficient in our spending. And we are not shy to say that.
But FUT's government's in a really tight situation where you have all these ones who are coming out of teacher training and they're expected to be posted. And yet you're saying that there's surplus. And so the people idling about, and so government shouldn't ideally be adding to these numbers.
You only add to it if you have optimally distributed. You only add to it if you have optimally distributed. But when you have more than 200 teachers being idle in a Denta municipality, why do you deploy another one again there? I mean...
And despite, in the face of all these challenges, the teachers are also saying that we're not going to accept the kind of...
They are talking about the salary remuneration for work, okay? Yeah. So there's a difference from the employment of more teachers to add to a deficient teacher distribution system. If you don't fix the system deploys teachers on an inequitable basis. Okay, if you don't fix the system, no matter how much water you pour in a basket, it will leak. That's the point I want to make. Right. The solution to ensuring that the students in Mafidugami have, and by the way, the data general showed me that Mafidugami will get teachers this year. Okay. So, the difference between the reason why the children in Mafidugami, where only one teacher is teaching the whole entire junior high school, and at Denta, where there are 200 teachers doing nothing, is that one place is a rural area, one place is an urban, but they are all Ghanaians. The taxes of those farmers there are used to pay the teachers in Adenta. So no one should be discriminated.
Sure.
And that is why we believe that the GES cannot continue approaching teacher deployment as always deploying more teachers. No, that is not the solution. The solution is to first rationalize the distribution system, ensure that it is equitable before you add to the numbers. Okay. Then we know that we are spending well and we are spending good.
All right. So, well, we're looking forward to what the finance minister is going to say in his budget presentation tomorrow, which I indicate is going to be here, live here on Joy News and on Joy FM, as well as our other platforms. So thank you very much for you coming through to the studio. Richard Kwashikove is convener at CAPCO. That's a campaign against privatization and commercialization of education. And Kofi Asare is with Africa Education Watch. Thank you to you both. Pleasure. We're taking a break here on the AM show. After the break, we'll talk about the NSMQ and have a conversation with Airtel Tigo, sponsors of the quiz. Do stay tuned in.